example for Nick Jones.
Aditi would never compromise
would
the
never
integrity of something like that. Let's bring on Aditi.
Aditi, would you take a knee for $1 million? You would. That sounds
Take a knee?
inappropriate, but it wasn't. You missed the rest of that conversation.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
we were talking about gambling, how like
Aditi looks horrified right
because
now.
you can bet on.
Well, I mean,
Yes, he does.
I just got sent a message about Deshaun Watson's accusers attending this game, and
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm late because we just had an hour-plus long conversation and solved nothing about how we are approaching this game.
Oh wow!
And
Oh, I want to hear about
yeah,
that.
Television-
now we're
network
talking
television
about
meeting
taking
that.
the
She was
knee,
like,
and
is Kaepernick
so
back?
it's-
I thought
correct.
we got that out of the system.
You know, I'm curious, Aditi, as from your perspective, because as just a fan, forget my being a radio or TV person. As a fan, and I'm watching the game, I don't care about it at this point. I don't want to hear about it on the broadcast. And I think that the majority of fans feel that way. But in the same vein, you probably feel like it can't be ignored. I don't know.
It
What do you
can't be
think?
ignored, Bull.
It can't.
Okay, so I think that there are multiple layers to this. And one of the things I'll say is that, yes, at some point there is exhaustion with that. How many years later do we talk about accusations against Tyreek Hill? Do we talk about accusations against Joe Mixon? Do we talk about accusations against Ben Roethlisberger? Do we talk about the time that Mike Vick served? There is a period of that. I acknowledge that. But I also think that how do you possibly, I mean, it's a normalization, right? How do you normalize someone as only, and maybe normalize isn't the right word, how do you say that someone is only a football player and only talk about the football piece in his very first game back when he hasn't played in, I don't know what, 700 days? And part of that was by his choice, which is part of the story, his engineering his way out of the city that he will be in, that he's playing. How do you ignore that part? And then this other piece, how do you ignore it when it was largely one of the largest stories in the NFL, and when it is part of the environment that we will be in? I mean, simply as journalists, there will be protests, there will be signage, there will be boos, the same way that when I was in Miami 2 days ago and MVP chants are taking over the building, and we acknowledge those MVP chants in our broadcast. If there is something that is different, how do you ignore it? How is it not part of the environment, part of the story?
It is part of the story.
Should Deshaun Watson throw for 450 yards and the Browns win? Part of the story is that he did it in this incredibly hostile environment in his return to the city where all of these things happened. You don't ignore it then, so how do you ignore it beforehand?
It can't be ignored for sure. It is a difficult, I think finding that balance, Aditi, is probably why your meeting lasted an hour and didn't settle anything, because I'm sure there are folks on one side of it that say, look, like Bull, we're here to do a football game. We're not here to try to solve social issues or to debate his guilt or innocence. That part of it is behind. But then on the other hand, to your point of environment, where is a big part of the story? Where is this game being played? And what is that environment like? And that is going to be a really tricky mix. I'm sure you guys will get it right because you're going to talk this out, and it hopefully will be somewhere in the middle where it's discussed. It's not the main storyline to the game, but it is a thread. And I think also what happens in the game determines
and that's exactly it. There's no right answer. There will be someone watching who says, I don't care. I just want to know whether he can throw the ball better to Amari Cooper or David Njoku, or whether the RPOs and the bootlegs make a difference in the way this offense functions. There will be people who say that. There will be other people that say, why are you only talking about the way that he throws the ball and how this offense is more dynamic with him in it? So it's striking the right note. It's finding the right balance. And this specifically is such a dicey, weighty conversation, because let's remember where Mike Vick was charged in a court of law and served time. This is just not so neat and clean. It just doesn't go in a neat little clean box like that. And these are accusations. These are allegations. And none of us have ever felt like there's any sort of really clean resolution in the way that you even address it. So Spiro Dides, who I really feel for, our play-by-play guy, we just went through a whole 15 minutes talking about the NFL's ruling versus what's happened with the grand jury, and is it our place to even get into any of that? And let me just say this. None of us wants to. I mean, we want to call a football game, right? Like, we want to talk about football.
Yep.
But part of the magic of football is that there are storylines that transcend what happens in between the lines. And I had the opportunity to be a big part of one of those stories this past weekend with Tua and the coaching that he has received and the way that that has changed. And it's all interconnected. All these threads, it's all connective in some way. But again, like, to me, part of this story is the way that Deshaun Watson and Jacoby Brissett have co-led, the way that they have somehow danced with each other. And I was telling this story going back to the preseason. I mean, I remember a game where Anthony Schwartz, who, P.S., kudos to him and kudos to the way that he played on Sunday and the way that he stuck with it and refused to go in a tank. But Anthony Schwartz in this preseason game dropped, I don't know, a third ball in a row. And he comes over to the sideline to apologize to Jacoby Brissett. And not that Jacoby was done with him, but it was Deshaun who pulled Anthony Schwartz aside and talked to him and sort of taught him a little bit. Look, this is the way you want to turn, and this is how you want to deal with a pick or whatever it was. In fact, I don't think it was a drop. It might have been an interception that happened because I don't even remember exactly.
No, you're right. That's what it was. He quit on a route, Aditi. He quit on a route.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. But it was Deshaun. Thank you for bailing me out there. This is great teamwork. It was Deshaun who took over let me teach and lead and guide. And the way that these men have worked together, the way that Jacoby talked about that great red zone throw to David Njoku and how they were in the room and Deshaun and Josh Dobbs are telling him, no, this is indeed a great play, even though Jacoby himself didn't really love that play right there. And so that's part of this story. I don't know that, a bow has been tied on everything that Jacoby has done in the first 12 weeks of this regular season, where Mary Kay Cabot, the brilliant Mary Kay Cabot, writes a story where she has no less than 4 people saying he's their favorite quarterback that they've ever played with.
Wow.
So there's a lot of storylines to this game that you want to get into, that you want to share, that you want to educate viewers and fans on. And the truth is, in a game like this, you've got Texans fans and you've got Browns fans. This isn't a national game where you're talking to the audience at large. You're talking to people that know these teams inside out. So to your point, Bull, a Browns fan is probably sick of the Deshaun Watson extracurricular conversation. But how do you not get at it in some way? How do you not do some sort of storytelling beyond just the X's and O's on the field?
No, you have to.
Aditi, you need to give those fans something extra.
Let me ask you this question. You were around during the time of Ben Roethlisberger. Generally speaking, when stuff like this happens, people are going to ask your teammates questions. Did that galvanize them to a certain extent? Did they use it to their advantage of as far as just being like, hey, it's us against everybody else?
I would say that it's not here. I got Pittsburgh, I guess 8 years Ben Roethlisberger's career. So that was all back sort of in his past, the motorcycle accident, accusations, what happened in Milledgeville, Georgia. There were certainly questions about Ben Roethlisberger's radio show and the way that he led. And teammates had to answer those questions. And as opposed to galvanizing them, I think it was just a frustration, sort of a distraction, a side note, which is part of why Ben Roethlisberger ultimately dropped that radio show. I don't know. I think it will speak to Deshaun Watson, the leader that he is, the teammate that he is, who he is in the locker room, to what it does for a team. I'll just go back to, I remember the preseason game in Jacksonville where there were lots of boos, lots of catcalls, and Joel Bitonio, asked about it in the locker room afterwards, said, hey, that's going to be all year. It'll be us against the world. And so at that time, clearly the Browns offense felt like, well, he's one of us, and there you go. And I know that that's a point that Jay Feely made in our conversation. He was in NFL locker rooms for, 13, 14 years. And he said, there were certainly teammates that maybe didn't live their life the way that he wanted to live his life, that he necessarily agreed with. But inside that locker room, it's sort of, what do you bring to work, and what is your productivity at work, and what do you offer to that team? I don't know. Again, this is so hard. I'm not absolving anybody of anything, but I think if there's a lesson from the whole Ben Roethlisberger situation, football fans want to win. They want to cheer on a team that does well and that wins. And a lot can be, I don't know if you just snorted or sneezed, but whatever it was, I think that.
Aditi, my sneeze aside, we were before giving best case scenario, worst case scenario for the Browns. What is your realistic? Obviously, they're 3-7, or they're 3-8. No, they're 4-7. Sorry.
4-7.
4-7. They'd have to win out to have a chance. Even if they do win out, they still might not make the playoffs, but they'll have to win out to have at least a chance. That's probably not realistic, but I don't know. What do you think is their realistic best expectations for you scenario with Deshaun, both personally for him and for the team?
I can't speak to that because for two reasons. One, I know who Deshaun Watson was the last time that he played fully. This is a young man that has not played competitive football in, again, I don't know what it is exactly, but 700-something days. I don't know. I mean, gosh, I called a game, or I was on the sideline for a game for the first time in a couple weeks, and I felt rusty. Tua talked to me. Tua, who is playing football at the highest level right now, talked to me 2 days ago about having a 6-day bye week and feeling rusty. So what is a 700-day period of time off? That I can't speak to. And the other thing I can't speak to is I don't know Deshaun Watson well enough to know how he will manage, handle what are some absolutely absurd expectations. Because let's just lay it out there. All of the baggage, all of the draft picks given up, all of the guaranteed money, all of the spotlight, and et cetera, et cetera. All of that becomes justified or worth it if he wins a Super Bowl. You're not winning a Super Bowl in one start, but does he carry the weight of that? Does he carry the weight of, I need to be perfect. I need to justify my being here. I need to justify my contract. I need to justify my existence in one game? Or is he cool enough to just say, okay, you can't, the same way you can't score, 3 touchdowns on one play, you can't win a Super Bowl in one game, in, 1 week 13 game. Does he manage all that really well? I don't know him well enough. I think that there's a personality component to that. I think there's a psychological component to that. And I haven't spoken to him this week. I don't know where he is on all of that.
Aditi,
but I do know that the weight of expectations are really, really hard. And how will he manage that?
Aditi, do you know, I know that oftentimes you find out that day, but do you know yet whether or not the Browns will be making Deshaun available for the broadcast team meetings when you get to sit down with players and coaches in Houston? Is that going to happen with Deshaun?
He better be. I'll be calling our buddy Peter John Baptiste and say, how are we supposed to do our job if we don't talk to your starting quarterback? I don't think there's been a single there hasn't been a single week where the starting quarterback was not made available.
No, but this obviously isn't routine.
No, but again, he's your starting quarterback. I mean, we have to be able to talk to him about all of these pieces, the rust, what he's capable of doing, running the offense, reacclimating to the team, taking the first team reps all this week, doing to mitigate. I mean, all of it. I can't, you know what? The Browns are an extremely professional organization. Peter John Baptiste is one of the best at what he does. There's no way they can't not make him available to us.
Yeah, Mary Kay said the same thing, because we were talking about like the availability of players. Tomorrow, it's expected that as is protocol, the starting quarterback will come out and meet with the media. And Mary Kay made the point that there won't be any ground rules. They don't expect that there will be an unusually short amount of time that they're granted with him. It will be whatever its standard is. If that's 15 minutes they get with him, then that's what they get with him. And she doesn't think there'll be any restraints. I'm not saying
and I
censor
think,
the questions,
Jay, I do think that the Browns. No, and Jay, I do think that the Browns are especially good at this. It takes me back all the way to Josh Gordon being suspended for which time, and the first day that he showed back up, the Browns put him in front of the media.
Right.
And it's almost like the quicker you talk, the more you diffuse all the side chatter in conversation, and you have something real to talk about as opposed to speculation and opinions. You actually have real quotes to use. So.
Absolutely.
And they did it, they did it when the league decision came down, so I just think that, and I think the quickest way, to Adam's point, to move to football and to move to the game is to get past the other piece of the conversation here.
What do you think about the move by Busby to bring the alleged victims to the game? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know why they would come. It's so weird to me.
Do you remember when Donald Trump was debating Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump invited?
Yeah,
right.
You did bring that up?
Yeah.
Well, Mike did, and I said
it seems like the same thing.
It was because Donald couldn't fit all his victims in the building.
Is that a good look? I mean, how much of that is
not to get into politics, but this is a ploy we've seen before.
Yeah, but what are your thoughts on?
It's sleazy.
To me, it feels like he's using them as props. And if he wanted to do something nice for them, why does he have to do it on a public stage? Why couldn't he just do it privately without the media and without the... It just seems like such a slimy, sleazy publicity ploy where he's actually using these women as props.
And it almost undermines the seriousness of the accusation.
Well, that's
you know what I mean?
That's exactly what my point is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what Mike is saying, but I would also say it's not just on him. The women are saying yes.
It's on them too.
And most women who are victims of, who feel that, most women who feel that they have been, this is why this is going to be so hard. Yeah. Most women who have been violated in some way don't necessarily want that information out there.
Right.
Don't want their identity out there. Don't want to feel publicly victimized again, perhaps.
Sure. Exactly.
But these women have said, yes, they do want to be seen and shown and identified. And so they have power in saying that that's what they want.
But
so,
also think about those other... Sorry.
Maybe the flip side to that is that's their moment. They want to be seen too.
But what stinks is think about those other women.
I can't speak to that.
Think about all the other accusers who also settled, who are not going to be sitting in a loge at watching this guy play football. And these women are representing them now and representing their cause. And that's a bad look in itself too.
You know what? I don't think there's any right answer. And until we put ourselves in their shoes and we fully know how they feel about it, and again, and as I'm talking aloud right here and I don't have something prepared, I wish I was a little bit more eloquent right now as I say this, but maybe that's it. Maybe it's, hey, he gets this big stage. Hey, he gets to be on CBS. Hey, he gets to play in front of all these people and make all this money. Well, I want to be seen too. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's not just slimy. Maybe it's not just an in-your-face thing.
We should finish.
Maybe it's
sorry. I'm doing a bad job here. We should finish on a positive and talk about the Jacoby Brissett era, which seems to have come to an end.
Can we just finish?
Yeah, I get it. On the Jacoby Brissett era, as it comes to its end, how are we going to reflect back on it? And do you think we've seen the last of him this year?
I don't think we've seen the last of him. To quote him, it's not like he's dying. I think he's still a vital part of the operation. I think that, every time you see Deshaun come to the bench after a drive, he'll be talking to Jacoby and to Josh Dobbs. I think that both of them have enormous input in what the offense is doing. I think that Deshaun really trusts what Jacoby and Josh Dobbs see. I think part of being a teammate is being helpful in that way. I think that the same way I was just talking about Deshaun taking Anthony Schwartz aside, I don't think that you should be surprised if the cameras catch Jacoby taking a receiver aside or a back or a lineman or someone to talk about something as well. These are co-leaders on this team, and Jacoby doesn't just disappear and go live in a hole or hide underneath the bench. Do I think this is the last time we see him on the field? I don't know. Do the Browns ever at any point get up by 30 and Jacoby gets to go in? I think that's a question for, do the Browns ever play the defense we expect them to play?
Yeah, that's the big piece of this. Aditi, we got to run because we got another guest lined up.
Thanks, Aditi.
Have a great game. We will be watching. And you can breathe. You can exhale.
You are now off the hot seat.
Yeah,
Dun, 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 dun.
It is very tricky, but you handled it well. And
Think what good practice we are.
Look, see?
Yeah, look at us as the preseason game to your Sunday broadcast.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's very, the whole thing's very complicated.
Wait. Aditi, one thing real quick. I'm going to use a word that you said. Beleaguered. You're in a beleaguered situation
That's a good word.
on Sunday.
Are you going to give it the definition of that?
Did she leave before I could drop a... Wow.
She froze.
Aditi's leaving me
Hey,
hanging.